Hey, folks, I think just about everyone has their personal, moral, or social issues that set them off more than others. They're not necessarily the most important issue in the world, but you know how our brains are. Certain things just speak to us in a way that others don't. For me, the two issues that I think come to mind are probably nuclear disarmament and capital punishment. Seriously, if you're having a conversation with me and you want to set me off, bring up nuclear weapons, and I'll go on an hour-long tangent while you presumably back away and vacate the premises. Still, the latter topic is one I've wanted to discuss on this channel for a while. You may have guessed that from the last graphs video, where I shared the relationship between application of capital punishment and violent crime rates, showing that capital punishment does not correlate with a decrease in violent crime. But today, rather than discussing the subject on a policy level, I want to address something very specific, something that you specifically may be able to actually help with in some small way. By its very nature, this video is going to touch on some pretty serious tragedy, so be warned in advance, and also know that I'm in no way connected to any of the organizations directly involved in this case. This video is comprised entirely of my own opinions. In 2003, Robert Leslie Roberson III was convicted of the alleged murder of his 2-year-old daughter, Nikki Michelle Curtis, and sentenced to death by the state of Texas. From then to now, Roberson has maintained his complete and total innocence, with the primary version of events in his defense seeming to be that Nikki Curtis died due to injury sustained by an accidental fall, which was possibly exacerbated by chronic illness. I will readily admit to you now that I, and any of you watching, do not know this is how things went down. What we do know is that a significant amount of reasonable doubt has been introduced since that 2003 conviction, and several factors even at the time should have cast aspersions on this punishment. After being made aware of this upcoming execution by the Innocence Project, I found that Dateline was running a brief podcast series covering some new/overlooked evidence on the subject. I am pulling some of this information from the existing episodes of that podcast, which, while imperfect, I would recommend listening to for additional context. I've also posted links to other relevant sources like Roberson's 2023 Habeas Corpus petition, and this next segment is kind of going to loosely follow a similar outline to episodes 2 and 3 of the Dateline podcast. That's mostly a coincidence. There's really just only so many things that you can discuss relating to this case right now, but you should at least be made aware of that fact. Here are a few things that, as far as I can tell, we know. 1. Roberson's conviction was at least in part issued due to dubious science. Roberson was alleged to have shaken his daughter to the point of mortal injury based on 3 symptoms: brain swelling, brain bleeding, and bleeding behind the eyes, which at the time were considered to point exclusively to, quote, shaken baby syndrome. It is now argued by Roberson's defense that this is junk science. Importantly, because people will rightfully be confused if I don't clarify this, the argument is not that shaking babies is safe or harmless. It's not. It's that the symptoms Nikki Curtis was presenting were consistent with other potential sources of injury that the state failed to consider, one of which being a fall. 2. Nikki Curtis was ill almost her entire life, likely sick with pneumonia at the time of her death, and had recently been prescribed medication that may have exacerbated her existing symptoms. 3. The state has been kicking this execution down the road for nearly a decade now, first halting it in 2016, and then again in 2024. 4. Roberson's lawyer at the time openly regrets having conceded the shaken baby framing of the case, as he does not believe that to be an accurate reflection of what happened. 5. Prosecutors, without evidence, briefly charged Roberson with an alleged sexual assault during this trial, before later dropping these charges, which some have understandably argued may have colored the proceedings a little bit. 6. The primary judge presiding over Roberson's trial, the late Bascom Bentley III, was allegedly directly involved in Nikki Curtis's medical care and eventual death, having, again, allegedly called the hospital to falsely grant conservatorship over to her maternal grandparents before then presiding over the ensuing murder case. The judge's previous involvement in this case obviously would present a potential vector for prejudice, and by my limited understanding of the situation, would probably be grounds for recusal from this case. But ultimately, here's the thing. We don't know what happened that day. We don't even know if a crime was committed. But if this execution is allowed to proceed, if Ken Paxton gets what he wants, the state of Texas, and by extension the United States of America, will have executed a man while failing to meet the legal standards we hold so dear. Even if after hearing all of this information, conducting your own research, what have you, you still think that Roberson is probably guilty, you don't know. And I believe that even if you're a believer in capital punishment, it's wrong to send someone to death. without being goddamn certain they did the crime. To that end, I have placed the Innocence Project petition to demand Texas change course in the description. Roberson is not requesting a pardon. All his team is asking is for a fair trial, something that I would argue he never got in the first place. I heavily encourage anyone watching to add their name and share this information with others. Sign the petition, send it to friends, post it in your Discords, whatever it is that you do, and ideally find some way that you're comfortable with to be alerted when similar situations arise. This execution is scheduled for October 16th, 2025, so odds are, if you're watching this, there is still time for you to make your voice heard. I personally think that capital punishment is flat out wrong. It's got a long, obscenely racist history of condemning innocent people, failing to meet acceptable standards, and given our methods of doing it, in my non-constitutional scholar opinion, violating the Eighth Amendment. But even if you think it's okay under certain circumstances, this specifically should disturb you, and you should make your disturbedness heard. Thank you for watching.